Ba-boom.
There it is. All right. Gotta make sure I have enough storage on my computer.
Uh-oh.
To record this. I do. Okay, we're good. That's my nightmare of recording an entire episode and then it's gone forever because my
Yeah.
I should just get an external hard drive. I don't know what I'm thinking.
What are you thinking, man? Oh, get ready to blast off. Welcome to, well, it'll either be the last podcast of 2022. Actually, no, it's definitely going to come out in 2023. So, welcome to the first podcast of 2023 for the Man vs. World show. I am your host, Mark Weapon, and I'm joined, as always, by Pete. Pete, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing pretty swell. I think we got a lot of cool stuff to talk about today. We're going to be getting into New Year's resolutions. I'm going to talk about my initial plans for, what I'm going to be trying to switch up this year, my thought process behind it, maybe, and hopefully offer you some structure and insight about how you guys can set up your best year ever. Because personally, I feel like we're ready for things to start getting awesome. I think from 2020, 2022, these have been some rough years. I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, they have been pretty challenging. And then on top of that, you throw the pandemic and all that bullshit and stuff on, with it. I'm kind of happy to see this out. Now, is it possible that 2023 is even crazier and worse? Yeah, it is. But I'm gonna do everything I can to possibly can to make this one fantastic. What about you, Pete? What's your intuition say about 2023? Is it going to get worse or is it going to get better?
It's hard to say for everybody else, but I can tell you for me, it's going to be the best one yet.
All right, there we go.
We're just going to set a high standard here. We're going for it.
Awesome. Let's get after it then. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about New Year's resolutions because most people do them absolutely freaking wrong. And they do things that screw them over and make sure that they have abandoned everything within a few days. Usually, it's a big. You probably actually know more about this than me. Were you ever working at the gym when during the New Year rush, and then got to see the subsequent fall off?
I did. It was interesting. Yeah.
So how many people? So how much did subscriptions spike, and then how much did they fall off afterward?
Well, what's interesting is the subscriptions, there was an influx and they do kind of trail off, but it's not like a sudden drop because people will still pay for it.
Right.
Because people are still hoping deep down that they will find the motivation somewhere.
But what about, so it takes a few months for people to admit defeat.
Yeah. But the attendance immediately, the next, literally January 2nd, nobody.
Yeah. At the gyms I've always gone to, it's always the first week of January, good luck getting a machine. Second week of January, back to normal. Back to normal. And I think this is because people, they approach New Year's resolutions as a very superficial thing. And probably the biggest mistake that you can make when it comes to any kind of sincere habit change is to try and do too much at once. And that's what most people do and you might think of that as being hardcore and tough, but in reality, trying to do a lot at once is actually shortcut thinking. It's actually a weak-minded attempt at change because realistically, we all know we can only change so much at any given time. And to try and do it all at once, super intensely, it's like you saying, hey, I don't want to do hard stuff, so I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off and then it'll be over and then my life will be easy. And it's no. That doesn't work, okay? If it's actually ripping a Band-Aid off, if it's actually something you can just do in one fell swoop, yeah, sure, go ahead. Cannonball into the deep end instead of slowly inching into the water to warm up, okay? But when we're talking about habit change, that's not a cannonball activity. That's not a tear the Band-Aid off activity. Habit change is a long game, all right? It's something that takes a while. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that your habit changes are very, very targeted. And you want to find keystone habits and make adjustments to those things. And so what are keystone habits? Those are just the habits that are kind of at the nexus of a lot of your different behaviors. And when you're really like, you're maybe you're a little earlier on in your self-development journey, you want to be doing one major habit change or two moderate habit changes. And you want to stick with that focus on that thing until it is fully internalized. Now, for example, okay, for the average guy, I think that one big thing could be quitting porn. For most guys, that's going to have the biggest benefit over almost anything else. Second place would probably be getting in shape and working on your diet and nutrition. But for a lot of guys, you can figure out a way to sort of blend the two as long as you but quitting porn should be the priority. And then the health and fitness stuff should be very slight. It should be something where you're just starting to build basic discipline. Maybe you cut out soda and you go for a walk every day, that kind of thing. Once you're more confident in your quitting porn process or whatever, you can start ramping all that stuff up. But in general, you want to keep it very targeted, very focused. Okay. And so once you have that, you want to make sure that you have a vision to go along with it. You don't want to just be, doing habit changes willy-nilly. What you need is a really strong mental commercial about why you are doing this. What do you stand to gain? Do you know exactly why you are doing this? If you don't, well, guess what? When you don't want to do it and you don't have a reason to, you're not going to do it and the habit's going to break, okay? So you want to make sure that you have a very strong, compelling commercial. So map out all the benefits you stand to gain for your major habit change and all the pain that you get to avoid. All right. You want to have a positive commercial that draws you toward it and a negative commercial that scares you into action almost. Okay. So with porn, for example, it would be something like, I'm going to be more productive. I'm going to be more sexually healthy. I'm going to feel more spiritually aligned. I'm going to feel more neurochemically on fire and able to, kick butt and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you have romantic interests and that porn's getting in the way of that. And then maybe the fear commercial would be well, what could happen if you just keep using porn? You're going to probably keep staying mediocre. You're probably going to keep having mediocre energy and motivation levels. If they're even at mediocre levels and they're not totally down in the dumps, right? If you've got some kind of sexual dysfunction or, social anxiety, these kinds of things, they're just going to stay there and probably get worse. I mean, that's what happens with a porn habit, is that it tends to escalate if you don't actively work on removing it. And so things will just get worse. And so, that's the general kind of setup stuff. But then you want to start thinking about, all right, what do I need to change in my life to support this big change? What sort of supporting behaviors can I use to help me with this main focus? Maybe it's going to be something like joining a community like the Self-Mastery Club, or maybe it's going to be, you're going to be modifying your schedule. You're going to be doing, you can add additional changes as long as they serve one massive macro change, okay? And ideally, you set them up in a way in where here's the minimum that I have to do each day to just get by, and here's what my ideal is, and you kind of end up somewhere between them day to day. And if you want more info on that, because I'm going to kind of gloss over that concept because it takes a little while to explain, you can check out the free training that we've got in the description here where I get really into this. And this is called the STACK method, which is, I think it's a game changer in terms of setting up your habits. And I'll talk a little bit more about the stack in a second when I talk about what I'm doing. But it basically just sets a minimum and a maximum that you have yourself do. Because it's good to have just a bare minimum of what you can expect from yourself. So when days are tough or you're overloaded or you're stressed or whatever, you can scale things back and just do the bare essentials that support your goals. But then when you're feeling good, you got the time, the space, the energy, you can crank things up and you know exactly what you're trying to hit. So check out the training in the description if you want to learn more about that, okay? And then if you can figure out how to get some stakes, some accountability, some skin in the game, maybe you hire a coach, you join some kind of cohort, you do anything. Maybe you buy something. Sometimes for people they have to literally tangibly buy something. Maybe it's like if you're getting into a new diet, you buy like an indoor grill, or maybe you just decide to start spending on higher quality food, or whatever. There's a bunch of different ways, but the more you invest in the process, the harder it is for you to ignore. So you combine all that stuff, that gives you a basic framework for how you want to get started with your 2023 resolutions. Okay. So does that make sense? Do I need to hit on anything else, Pete, with that, you think?
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm curious, what are you going to be trying to hit in 2023? What are you going to try to do?
Sure. So the absolute biggest thing that I'm going to be focusing on is what I call centering. All right. And centering is basically like a meeting with yourself. And in this meeting, I typically do it in like a journal fashion where I'm journaling. And I call it centering because what you're doing is you're trying to get yourself cool with what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen. That's it. That's all you're doing is you're simply orienting yourself to the best of your possible ability at any given point in time. All right. And so for example, all right, say I'm doing centering in the evening. Well, I'm going to check and see, all right, well, how do I feel about today? How'd today go? Okay. If I've got any sorts of lingering negative emotions, if I screwed anything up, if anything good happened, I'm going to just talk to myself about it. Just kind of catch up with where I've been. Then once that's clear and feels good, and I respond to myself with self-talk and that sort of thing, kind of just like a meeting with a friend, but it's myself and you show up as a friend to yourself. Then I check with, all right, well, how am I feeling right now? Am I stressed? Am I tired? Is there any sort of emotional upset that is currently active? And I process that. But then I look forward and I say, all right, well, what's coming up? How do I feel about that? If I'm doing at the end of the day, this is actually one of my things, is that I want to plan the following day and make sure that I've got a clear idea of like, here's my general intentions. And once you have all that kind of stuff, like, you think about, oh, well, I got that thing coming up, but there's this big fear that comes up around that. Maybe I'll journal about that. I'll do a preemptive metascript entry, which, and again, you can hear about that as well in the training and the description. So check that out if you're interested in hearing like how I use my journaling technique to pre-program my mind for success and that sort of thing, because that's a really core part of what I do. But anyway, these self-meetings, these centering sessions, my goal is to have 3 of them per day, every day for 2023, because I'm curious as to how much that would transform my life. Because from what I've found is like doing it once a day, that'll keep you functional. That'll keep things like, that's the 80-20 is just a once a day centering session. Now, twice a day is even better. You can have a morning one and an evening one. But what I found is that you actually do get a significant amount more benefit when you have one in the middle of the day as well. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's like you set off in the morning, you got a plan of how things are going to go, but then by noon, things have gone sideways. And if you don't readjust your plan, if you don't readjust your mindset, then it'll just keep going sideways until you hit the end of the day. And then you have to be like, oh yeah, shit went sideways and I lost a huge amount of the day, if not all of it. And so I want one kind of reset period in the center of the day, or in the middle of the day as well. So that's my top resolution. And frankly, that's not going to be that big of a challenge for me. So because of that, I've got a couple other ones that I'm going to be stacking with this. But first, does the centering thing I said all make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I find a lot of the time, sometimes I just am feeling in a funk, so to speak, and I have no idea why.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good at getting out of that, but it's kind of annoying that it happens at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I wonder if this practice of centering, so to speak, multiple times throughout the day, I feel like that would be really good for preventing that kind of thing. Do you find that to be the case, or does it still come up? Because if you're always in communication with yourself and you're always digging up the lies that are taking root in your brain, it seems like that's what you're doing with this. I feel like it would help. prevent the fruit of those seeds. What do you think?
Yes, that's exactly it. And a part I actually forgot to mention is that I always start these with prayer. And so the idea here is this, like this is my working philosophy at the moment, is that in any given moment, you can always identify a best course of action. And spiritually speaking, I believe that that best course of action is God's will for you. And the extent to which you align with that is the extent to which you have access to the power of God. All right. And that might sound like a grandiose statement, but that's really what I believe, is that if you are doing the best thing you possibly can in any given moment, then you have the force and power of God behind you, because that's ultimately what he wants you to do. He wants you to like live the best life you can. And so if I want to take always a second to kind of orient myself toward that highest conception of goodness, at least practically, that's what prayer is. It's like, I can't claim direct access to God, but I can certainly claim my idea of direct access to God. I can claim, we all have access to our own idea of God, and, depending upon our level of spiritual development is really what determines how accurate that image is. But if you are striving toward it, then you are, I think, putting yourself in the best position to be both practically and spiritually blessed, as it were. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, 100%.
So that's the big thing, is the centering focus. But then I have a couple other supporting things. The next one is I want to be doing what I call offense every single day. So I think you can break work down into two major categories: offense and defense. So defense is any productive work that you do that is just keeping current systems running. So, for example, like me doing this podcast, that's defense. We've got a set schedule for these things, or set-ish schedule. Hopefully we get that a little bit more solidified in 2023. But it's something that we want to just keep going, right? Defense maintains the status quo. And if you set up your status quo properly, then you need to do defense. And it's important, me planning my days, me responding to emails, me working with clients, me producing the daily, emails, that kind of stuff, running my programs. That's all defensive work. That doesn't conquer new territory. It just keeps the current territory vital and thriving. And hopefully, there will be compounding gains and stuff like that. Like playing good defense can lead to surplus and new opportunities and things like that, but it's not a proactive campaign into conquering new areas of life. And that's what I believe offense is. Offense is when you are working on your highest priority action that actually will unlock new areas, new level ups, new, business opportunities, career opportunities, whatever it is for you. Like for some people, it might be, something, more spiritual or health focused or family focused. I don't know. It all depends on what your main goals are. But for me, my offensive work is on building, this project, building it up, making it stronger. And what I found is that in 2022, I spent too much time playing defense. And when I would work on offense, it was usually scattered, and it was oftentimes under a lot of pressure and disorganized and that sort of thing. So my goal for this year is to make sure that I'm doing, so my hard line, this is a stack method idea, like my minimum each day is 15 minutes of offense. That's it. Something 100% doable, even on a very bad day. I can pull up what is that top priority project and just sink 15 minutes into it. And to be honest, I doubt I will ever do just 15 minutes. Might happen some days, but because I give myself permission to, but often it's going to be more than that, at least a few minutes more. And then my mainline requirement, i.e. my ideal requirement, is at least an hour. Okay, so I got this range, 15 minutes to an hour. Okay. And then after that, I'm going to definitely have days where I'm going to sink, 4 hours into the project. But even on days where I've got a bunch of backlog admin shit and that kind of stuff, I'm going to be trying to get 15 minutes to an hour in on my main focus. So that's another one.
Do you find that with offensive work, you run into more resistance? Because I could look back and say, whenever I do something that could be categorized as offensive work, I run into about 10 times more resistance than defensive work. Is that because there's just the fear of, that external, usually, motivation of, well, I got to do this, to keep up. I got to react to the things that are being thrown at me. Why do you think that is? Have you experienced the same thing?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think that's pretty circumstantial, but I don't think it's uncommon at all. Like for me, I like doing the offensive work, but the problem is that I've kind of bought into the false narrative that I need like so much space and time to do that kind of stuff. Like I need to have like a full protected day where I can really sink my teeth into it. And yeah, that's ideal, but my current life doesn't allow for that. And so it's like being willing to be more rugged with it. But I think if that offensive work is something that's challenging, that's scary, that's if you're not used to getting yourself to take proactive action, then yeah, for sure you're going to experience some resistance around it, which is why making a real focus on getting some work done on it, is huge. Like, for example, like say you've got a project and you make your minimum just 5 minutes of working on that project. Maybe that's all you do one day. And in that 5 minutes, you pretty much just spend 5 minutes thinking about it and maybe write a couple of bullets down of things to consider. Okay. Well, once you do that, once you just, start cracking it open, it becomes easier and easier and easier to show back up to it because all of that swirling unknown becomes broken down. It becomes more known. It becomes more manageable. You start realizing here are the paths of action. Here are the paths of opportunity. And it becomes, much simpler to pick back up. So I think this consistency sort of thing is very, very powerful in relation to this kind of activity.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see why you give yourself permission to do those bite-sized things because it makes it less daunting.
Yeah. Yeah. And the goal for me is to get to a point where I can be sinking more than just, an hour into it a day. But we gotta systematize things a little bit before that. So that's the second one. The third thing is I'm trying to make sure that every single day I am up before my daughter. And this is something that I've done on and off, and hands down, it makes a massive difference in my productivity. If I can get like a chunk of work done, even if I just get my morning centering done before she's awake, because a lot of times, if I'm not on this sort of mode, then I pretty much just use my my baby monitor as my alarm clock because my daughter wakes up like clockwork at like 7:30 every morning, and so I just often would just get up when she starts yelling, "Hey, Dada, come get me up, Dada!" And if I don't get her up quick enough, she just starts like kicking the door. So I'm trying to avoid that and make sure that I'm up ahead of her, get some work in, get some top priority stuff. Ideally, like what I want to be doing is getting up and hitting that mainline hour every single morning. And if I can do that, then that makes, the rest of the day gravy pretty much, because I know I'm hitting my most valuable thing. That also means I got to go to bed earlier, which has got me this is a keystone habit for me because it moves a lot of things. It forces me to get to bed earlier. And then I feel a lot of resistance to that because I need to get time to myself. I need to have time to chill out and whatever. And I realize, okay, well, I just have to end my day earlier. I just have to actually move everything earlier and make sure that I have downtime before my daughter goes to bed, maybe even while she's still at school, like learning how to reorganize my schedule and stuff to keep my work in the parts of the day where I have the most energy. And, another thing is even on a weekend, I want to be getting up early, and I want to get up early and do my own shit. Like if maybe on the weekends, I'm not going to be doing a lot of hard work. And so I can just get up and do something that I wanted. Like, instead of staying up till like 12 at night or 1 in the morning and watching a UFC fight, I can just buy it and then watch it the next morning, and just skip through all the bullshit that I don't feel like watching anyway, like all the stuff in between the fights. Like I can have fun in the mornings. It can be like little kids Saturday morning cartoon stuff. It's just like restructuring my days to serve me better. So yeah, that's one to think about. And if you're someone who is, you've got like a 9 to 5 or you got kids or whatever, one of the biggest things you can do, unless you're like a hardcore night owl, is to get up early. Get yourself some protected time in the morning where you can do what you want to do. There's a lot of books about this that talk about the power of this because it is really powerful. It's like you have time and energy. If you're on the normal 9 to 5, then it's like you only have time after your job, after the kids are asleep, whatever. And your energy is always like a lot lower. Again, unless you're one of those hardcore night owls. In that case, try and get up as late as possible so that you can maximize your time later. But for me, I am not that way. I'm pretty beat by the end of the day. So yeah. What are you, Pete? Are you a night owl or a morning person?
I wish I was more of a morning person. There's some people who they need 3 hours of sleep and then they're ready to go. I'm not like that, but no, I definitely find the exact same thing. If I'm waking up early consistently, that is one of those key things that makes everything a lot easier.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you want inspiration on this, what is it, the books? There's one, it's called like the 5 a.m. Club, which is kind of a weird book, but it might sell you. Another one is the Hale Elrod's Miracle Morning. That's another one. I know Grant Cardone, he had like one video I saw a while ago where he just like talked. It was just like him talking on the phone, like driving in the dark. He's like, I beat the sun up. And he's just, in his southern accent talking about, yeah, I beat you, son. And just like going off about how like powerful he feels when he beats the sun up and that sort of shit. Yeah, sell yourself on these things. A lot of times, like when I read books today, even if I already know the information, I'm reading it because I'm trying to indoctrinate myself. And learning how to intentionally indoctrinate yourself to an idea is powerful. It's like being able to like sit and listen and absorb a perspective to the point where it starts activating your emotional system. And being able to do that around good things is a very useful skill. So, you think getting up early would help you out, then maybe check out some of those things. So, okay, that's the third thing. The next one is just going to get a little bit more strict with my diet. And I had been very strict with my diet, fell off for, Christmas and stuff like that, and fell off a little bit before that with the launch of the Reforged Man Gold program, because that took a lot of effort and there was a lot of other shit going on, and just I lost a bunch of discipline around that just because I was so pressed from all sides. And I realized, like, for the diet thing, I needed to make it a little bit more reasonable. And what I think is going to work best for me, and this is something that I'm going to tweak probably as we go, is just like most of my meals are just going to be fruit and meat. I love that. It feels like a king diet. It's like I just get to eat like, steaks, eggs, like, chicken, all that kind of stuff. That's the main thing. And then I have as much fruit as I want. I found that when I do that, I never want to eat past hunger. Keeps my energy levels feeling really good. I feel like my diet's actually upgraded. I enjoy it. It's delicious. But I still get cravings, right? And so the tweak I'm making to this, rather than make it into being some kind of black and white sort of religious thing. I know that works for some people. For me, it won't work for me because I actually don't want to live that way. I don't want to say goodbye to all the other kinds of foods. I don't want to be like so black and white. And again, different strokes for different folks. But for me, I want to give myself like 3 quote unquote cheat meals a week. And this doesn't mean that it's like a hog wild binge, but I'll just let myself eat, what I want. And if I only do that 3 days a week and I keep those relatively reasonable, I'm pretty certain that this is going to be extremely reasonable and sustainable for me. So I'll update as this goes, but for the most part, that's the meal plan. And yeah, the final thing is just trying to plan the following day, the day before, so that when I get up in the morning, I can just hit the gas pedal and go. Maybe make a slight adjustment for things. And yeah, like, so for example, it's 4 p.m. now, and I've already planned my following day. I've already gotten all my work done for the day, and now I have the rest of the evening free. I've already put in about like 5.5, 6 hours of work by the time this podcast is done. And being able to fully shut off in the evenings is something that I think will allow, which I know will allow me to maintain a lot more focus. Like, quantity is not always what you want when it comes to focused work. All right, quality is like, people think that time is just static, and if you spend 8 hours of focused work, that beats 4 hours of focused work. And for certain kinds of things, maybe it is. Like, if you're a farmer, or you're someone who's doing manual labor, or something that you can do for hours and hours at a time without like major drain upon you, then yes, maybe longer is better. But for me, I found that the quality of energy and focus actually is extremely important. So for example, if I'm in a really great spot and I'm sitting down to write emails for the daily email list, which, you should get on. If you're not, go to markquepit.com, or if you even just watch the free training that I've been referencing, you'll get on the email list that way as well. But I found that if I'm in a good headspace and I'm very focused, my average email time is like, between 10 and 20 minutes. If I'm not focused, if I'm kind of scattered, if I'm already tired, if I'm like, sort of floating around, clicking on other stuff, looking at messages while I'm doing it, it bumps up to half an hour to 45 minutes per email. So getting that quality focus is essential. And in order to do that, I need to make sure that I've got this kind of like break period where I recharge each day. And that keeps me a lot sharper and ultimately, I think, a lot more productive. So those are my big changes. And for a lot of you guys out there, you might want to steal some of these. You may not want to do all of these. You're going to have to just look at like the way you want to think about it is like, what's causing me the most pain in my life? And that's probably the thing that offers the most opportunity. And you just want to start systematically breaking it down into manageable chunks and just going after it. And if you want help with the sustainability, if you want help with continued motivation, having a community, having like other people on board with you, then you're going to want to check out the Self-Mastery Club, where we have our like whole community around all the content we talk about. And I'm telling you, it's a game changer when you get yourself plugged in to a group of other like-minded guys who are looking forward to living on the front lines of their own lives.
Awesome, man. Guys, if you have any New Year's resolutions of your own that you think would make good additions to this list, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I'm curious to read them. Yeah,
actually, yeah, let's do that. Everyone, put your New Year resolutions in the comment. I like that, in the comments.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading those. I always have problems coming up with enticing ones. I think mainly because I'm scared I'm going to be one of those people. It's like, oh, well, if I just set a New Year's resolution, those are like... those are doomed to fail. I'm not going to even bother, but it's not true. It's just not, I mean.
So here's a way to get out of that. All right. Instead of looking at it as you're just one of these like New Year's resolution fools who just will abandon it right away.
Yeah.
You want to be thinking about it as like, I'm the kind of guy who sets quarterly goals and then yearly evaluates them. Because that's what I do. It's like, really what I'm talking about here right now, I'm framing it as 2023, but ideally this is just Q1. All right. By the end of Q1, hopefully all of this is internalized, and then Q2, I can move on to a different chunk, a different focus. And so if you think about it as like, all right, this is the kind of guy that I'm going to be, then you can kind of step away from that, pitiful state of the faux New Year's resolutioner.
That's definitely easier for me to buy into. I like that. Yeah, take it to the quarters instead of the full year. So, all right, well, the first clip I wanted to show you comes from Cenk's nephew, Hassan Piker, and this video that he posted on YouTube is called The Final Boss of NoFap. So I thought we would check that out.
Yeah, that sounds good. I was just talking to you before the show. I was like, I didn't realize Hassan was Cenk's nephew. And I understand now why I dislike him so much. And maybe he's a great guy. I don't know. But most of the stuff he says seems specifically designed to annoy me. So let's see what he has to say.
6th grade, the porn, I jumped into some weird categories, man. This is tough. Transgenders having sex with chicks. And why am I watching this stuff? Well, because I'm opening myself up to spirits and spirits the more I watch the porn, and I don't even realize it.
Bro, it's always trans porn. What is that? Like, why do these fucking right-wingers love trans porn so much? I don't get it. Like, no disrespect to, you know, trans porn watchers and you know, even the trans sex workers and stuff, but it's like, I don't understand it.
I also don't understand being like this sad about something that you bat off to.
Yeah. What is the problem?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you like trans porn. Who gives a shit, bro? Chill the fuck out. Like, this dude would have been...
Yeah, dude, it's totally cool. You identify as heterosexual, but you're watching chicks with dicks. It's totally fine. That's your normal, man.
Infinitely happier if he just, like, lived his best queer life. He's a good-looking guy. He's going to the fucking gym. You know what I mean?
Fuck a lot.
Yeah,
Although
I don't know
maybe-
why he just doesn't do that.
I feel like he might be becoming like some kind of right-wing influencer.
Okay. So here's the thing that I don't think our dear friend Hassan is aware of is that porn can morph your sexual tastes to a point where it no longer matches your natural sexuality. There's this thing, it's called HOCD. It's called homosexual obsessive compulsive disorder. And here's how it typically comes about is that a straight guy who has felt he was straight, you know, since he was young, he starts using porn, and for whatever reason, because of the way the neurons fire in his brain, he ends up watching gay porn. And for a lot of guys who are straight, who do that, it creates a rather intense cocktail of emotions in his mind. And because of that, he ends up kind of having like a powerful sexual reaction. And it then leads to him getting hooked on it. And this doesn't just happen with this kind of thing. You might be saying, oh, well, that guy's clearly gay. Not necessarily, okay? Like there are many documented cases, for example, of women who orgasm during rape, okay? Does that mean she liked it? No, it just means that the intensity of the situation mixed with a physical stimuli caused that orgasm reflex. And this can cause all kinds of problems. Obviously, in the rape scenario, that can cause all kinds of like, you know, emotional trauma. It's like, holy shit, did I like it? Did I ask for it? Like all that kind of shit. But like in terms of like guys doing this with porn, it really confuses them. And then the OCD element is where they get freaked out and they're like, shit, am I gay? And then they obsessively check themselves. They watch gay porn to see if they have a sexual reaction to it. And then they're constantly trying to see, am I gay? Am I not? Like that sort of thing. And then it becomes an obsessive thing. And I've seen this happen across many different genres. Like, for example, with this guy here, it sounds like he got hooked on the trans porn. But I've heard it happen in even weirder ways. Like I'm not even going to go into all the wild fetishes I've heard of in my process of being a professional porn addiction recovery coach. Okay. Like I've been doing this shit stuff for 10 years and I've heard it all and it gets wild. And all I can say is that like, you're not really you can't really predict how your brain is going to respond to these hyperstimuluses, all right, of, you know, unlimited internet pornography access with infinite novelty. And a lot of it is like, if you're just continuously, you know, fapping to vanilla, regular porn, eventually that's going to stop exciting you. And there almost needs to be something else injected in that gives you the spice back. And the easiest way to do that is to inject something that is taboo, something that is racy, something that is maybe even frightening or disturbing, because that injects emotion into it. And the more the emotion's heightened, even if it's a negative emotion, it can increase the intensity of the orgasmic experience. And then once you do that, and you keep doing it, you start chasing that high because you've just been fapping so damn much, you can't even feel anything unless you're watching something extreme, then your brain starts getting adapted to that stimulus. You start actually having a craving for that thing. And so how do you fix this? Well, you quit porn. And as you quit porn, you go through 90 days, 100 days, maybe sometimes even up to 6 months, depending on how deep you are into this thing, your natural sexuality will reemerge. And I've seen this repeatedly. Guys who are hooked on wild, porn fetishes, they end up just coming back to their natural sexuality. Now, this isn't just straight guys, all right? There are instances of gay guys who identify very strongly as gay getting hooked on straight porn. And then they go through the same thing. They get their own crisis of identity where they feel like, oh, porn's wiring me to be someone that I'm not really, who I'm not really, and that sort of thing. And so, to just dismiss this kind of thing as like, oh, that guy's gay is, I think, it's simply inaccurate. Is it possible that does happen sometimes, that people find closeted fetishes and things like that? Sure. Okay. But even in that case, you get to decide what sexual desires you act upon. In fact, we are all literally called to this, every single one of us, because every guy is going to have more sexual urges than he could really act on. All right. That's just the way it is. All right. Otherwise, we'd just be freaking animals. And so you're always going to have to pick and choose what sexual activity aligns with you most authentically. And that is your responsibility to curate your sexual behavior so that your appetites do not escalate into something that is significantly at odds with who you truly are. So, I would say L for Hassan here, but I honestly didn't expect anything less. So it is what it is.
It's not surprising. Yeah, it is. Alrighty, next up I wanted to get your take on a video that Ali Abdaal titled, "Follow Your Passion is Terrible Advice, Here's Why."
Oh, I'm following my passion. I'm already heated. Let's see.
Uh-oh.
If you actually take what you love and you make it a job, that is the quickest path to become miserable at doing the thing. This is pretty classic amongst musicians, apparently. There was an interview I was watching with Ed Sheeran where he was kind of saying that, like, yeah, I enjoy music, but like, now that it's a career, I have to try and find things outside of music that I also enjoy. And so he's taken up painting or whatever because he's trying to find a thing that's not his day job. Because what used to be fun, music, has now become work. And you see this with video game streamers as well. On the surface, that is the absolute dream career. You make a living, you make stupid amounts of money doing what you love, i.e. playing video games. But when you speak to streamers, when you watch interviews with them, a lot of them don't seem like they're having a lot of fun playing video games. I was chatting to a huge streamer the other day and he was like, you know what, I'll do anything to not have to make a video. And it's like this thing that once was his passion, video gaming, has now had the passion kind of sucked dry from it because it's a thing that's become his job. The other thing here is that if you actually ask someone what are they passionate about, like right now, I'm gonna ask you, what are you currently passionate about? It's actually really hard to answer that question. And the things that we're passionate about are generally not the things that we can reliably and feasibly make a reasonable career out of. There's a good study that was done by a psychologist called Amy Rosensky, and she studied a bunch of admin assistants, i.e. people doing a generally fairly boring on the surface office job. And she tried to see like what was the difference between the people who were passionate about the admin job and the people who weren't. And she found that the biggest predictor of it was just how long they were doing the thing. And generally the theory was that if you're doing something for a long time, you become good at doing the thing, and therefore you develop a passion for doing the thing.
Okay. So, big thing I think that's being missed here. Well, there's a couple big things that are being missed. The first big thing is that passion does not equal stimulation. Okay? That's wrong. It's like, oh, I'm passionate about video games. You're stimulated by video games in general. Okay? Like it releases dopamine. Okay? Passion is when you're willing to sacrifice for something. Passion is tied to meaning, all right? Like, that's why we call it the Passion of Christ, okay? He was not being pleasurably stimulated. He was literally being tortured to death. But why do we call it the Passion? It's because he was pursuing his highest mission. He was willing to sacrifice to save the world, right? So goes the Christian mythos, all right? And that is what passion is when you find something that has a meaning that you're willing to give things up for realizing, okay? And so if you recognize this, then following your passion, I'd argue, is something that every single person needs to do. You need to find the things that you are willing to sacrifice for. And that might play itself out differently. Maybe it means working a job that you're not necessarily in love with, but it serves the ideal meaning in your life. And maybe that meaning is just simply providing for your family and giving them a certain quality of life that you really care about giving them. In my case, for example, the work that I do, I am deeply passionate about, right? Like I really care about the impact I'm trying to make in men's lives. It's something that I'm willing to suffer for, all right? Like that's what passion is, and that's what you want to try and find. And the other, I think, point to make here is that the game changes very quickly. The game you're playing can change very quickly, and if you don't keep your eye on the ball, you won't even notice that it changes. And this goes back to his Ed Sheeran example, where it's like, oh, Ed Sheeran used to love making music, but now it just feels like work. Well, it's probably different now. Okay. Back when he first started it, he got to just follow his muse. He got to work when he wanted to and not when he didn't. But now, okay, he has to think about a bunch of stuff. He's got to think about his label. He's got to think about his fans. He's got to think about literally his income. All right. And all of a sudden, that's not the exact same game as him simply making the music that he wants, how he wants to make it. He's got all these other things going on. And it sounds like with the way that creative music game has changed for him, it's stopped feeling as gratifying. And, that's just the way things go sometimes. But you got to watch this, right? Because people screw this up all the time in really obvious ways. Like I'll use myself an example of like a really stupid example, but I think it's one that a lot of people do. Like when I had to pick my major for college, okay, I picked computer science, software engineering. And the reason I picked that because I liked video games. I'm like, oh, I liked video games, so I'll learn how to code and shit because it seemed as close to my stimulus of choice. Okay, software engineering and playing video games are entirely different games. They're entirely different things, but we trick ourselves. We try and build these bridges where we don't really understand what it is that we're getting into, Yeah, you got to watch this sort of morphing of what you think you're doing versus what you're actually doing. Like people were like, "Oh, I want to be a musician," and then they realize everything that goes into actually being a musician, and it's like, "Holy shit, this actually sucks. This is really hard. I have to sit down and really grind this stuff out. I gotta go and play these live shows. I gotta get myself booked. I gotta do I gotta build an audience on Instagram. A bunch of things that are not just making music." And so keeping clear exactly what the game you're playing is and what's entailed in it will do a lot to help prevent you from hitting these sorts of motivational dead ends.
You nailed it right there, because all the while he's talking, I'm going, yeah, what about Ed Sheeran? But it's because the definitions are different. Passion, what does passion mean? Yeah, exactly. Passion. People nowadays, they confuse that with what stimulates them. They are not keyed into their deepest desires at all.
Yeah, 100%. And so you got to do the work to dig into that, and it's going to be a bit of trial and error. Sometimes you're just throwing shit at a dartboard and seeing what sticks, but that's how it goes, right? All you can do is place bets and see what pays off, see what happens, and adjust from there. But if you don't do that work, then you're definitely not going to find what you're supposed to do. So get out there and give it your all.
Right on. Alrighty, next up, Jocko Willink recently brought a study to my attention that is now referred to as the Monster Study. And this clip is a brief overview of what it was.
All right, let's check it out.
They took 22 kids that had some kind of speech impediment, and they tried to see if they could help stuttering kids by giving them positive feedback, how bad it hurt them if they gave them negative feedback, and if they took normal kids, what it would do to normal kids if they told them they had a speech impediment. Group 1A and Group 1B, these were kids that actually stuttered. And in Group 1A, they told the kids hey, don't worry, you'll outgrow the stuttering. You'll be able to speak even much better than you're speaking now. Don't worry about what other people say. You'll grow out of it. No big deal. That's how they treated those kids. Then in Group B, they would tell the kids that stuttered, it's going to get worse, this kind of stuff. Just evil. I mean, right? Kind of just evil. Like, even when you hear it now, that's why they call it the monster study. Yeah. So that's where the kids that actually stuttered. Then they had some kids that had normal speech. And one group of the kids that had normal speech, they said, you know, hey, you're really eloquent, you're very articulate, gave them praise. The other group, they told them, the staff has come to the conclusion that you have a great deal of trouble with your speech. You have many of the symptoms of a child who's beginning to stutter. You must try to stop yourself immediately. Use your willpower. Do anything to keep from stuttering. Don't ever speak unless you can do it right.
Oof.
Her findings supported, or their findings supported, the hypothesis that evaluative labeling can influence behavior. After these kids were all messed up and had messed up speech, she went back to the orphanage to try and reverse the effects, now using like positive language. Mm-hmm. And after a little while, she reported, quote, she was unable to provide enough positive therapy to reverse the effects.
Oh, God. That makes me feel gross just like hearing about that. But that's just something I feel like is kind of obvious, but maybe not. Like, I've been studying psychology for like a long time, and I've been studying marketing probably even more intensely. And that's the way it works, is like, if you can inception an idea into someone's head, that can change their life, right? It can absolutely change their life for better or for worse. And we have to be watching out for this kind of thing. And most of us, we have some kind of baggage around this already plugged into us, where it's like you were told you were dumb as a kid, you're told you weren't going to amount to anything. You were told, like, you know, hey, you suck at this, you suck at that. And then we just take it as gospel, and then that's how we live our lives, right? Like, I think it's possible to undo all of this kind of stuff, but you have to want to. And it takes, I think, a fundamental sense of disagreeability, all right? And this is something that luckily I've always kind of had in spades. Like, I am happy to argue and fight with people and disagree with them, and I almost kind of get off on it. But like, a lot of people don't. A lot of people really are non-confrontational, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to say no. Like, if someone communicates to them either directly or indirectly that they're not good, well, then there's a pretty good chance that most people will just be like, oh, I guess you're right. And that's the worst, is like when your sense of self is challenged, when like someone communicates to you that you are not worth loving properly for whatever reason. If you internalize that message, maybe it's because you're bullied, maybe it's because your parents only showed you conditional love, you know, who knows what it could be. It could be a million different things that communicate this message to you. But if you internalize that, then you're going to act that story out. And at some point, if you want to break free from that, you have to reject that initial diagnosis of your own unlovability. And you have to claim it. You have to say, no, fuck that. I'm good. I'm worth the effort. I'm worthy of the reward. And this is one of the hardest things I see in men's work. This is the thing that so many guys struggle with, is that they identify with their either actual or just perceived status. And they feel like there's no way they can break out of it. And so, you know, you have to take control of your own narrative about yourself and who you are. And if you don't, then you're fucked, right? And this is what I think is going on so much in the media today. And part of the reason why I give a shit about the way popular culture talks about men and things like that. Like, you know, it's easy to sit over here as a, you know, guy who had a good upbringing, has, you know, been fed healthy morals, a good worldview. It's easy for me to laugh at all these people who just like want to talk about men as evil. You know, that you know, you got to let women do it. You got men just sit in the corner, shut up. You know, it's like, if you're a straight white male, your time is past. You got to let other people go. Like, it's easy for me to laugh about that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of guys out there who are like, oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. I am bad. Everyone else should go ahead. Oh, I shouldn't do anything good. Oh, yeah, I am kind of weak. You know, now that you mention it, I'm kind of anxious too. And you know what? I think you're right. I think I do have ADD, and I think I do need to be highly medicated, and just like falling into all of this kind of shit. Like, I've seen like so many people who have ADD, and they don't. They don't. They just have the same struggle focusing that everyone else does, and they probably have a porn and video game addiction on top of it that just makes it seem like they have ADD, but they take that diagnosis and they hold on to it. They just press it into their heart, and they're like, oh, yes, I can't focus. You're right. I need to be drugged up. Yes, it's true. And it's just like that then becomes their excuse for everything in life, because it creates this like codependent relationship between them and their diagnosis. And you can I see this on the left as well. You see a bunch of weak, simpering men who feel it's their duty to be weak and simpering because that's what they're told is righteous. And they internalize that, and that then becomes their excuse for not cutting a powerful, righteous path through their own life. And it pisses me off. And so like, all I can say is that this is why I'm trying to raise my daughter to have an extreme sense of confidence. We can always, that's going to get peeled back, through, I think, being honest with her as she grows, making sure that she has real consequences for her actions, that sort of thing. But in general, I want to instill her with as much confidence and belief in her own inherent dignity and potential as possible. Because if you can get that stuff in deep early, then I think you're setting yourself up for a big, a great advantage later in life. And if you find that you're someone who has been given the opposite upbringing, all is not lost. In fact, you are in a position where you can go on a journey. You can go on a rite of passage where you can unlock this power inside of yourself. And yes, it will be hard, but if you claim it, you will claim it on an extremely conscious level that you will own, in many cases, more fully than the person who was just instilled with this positive mentality from childhood. So it's worth going on this journey of disagreeing with the bullshit narratives in your head, even if it's massively scary and difficult, because you can come out on the other side completely transformed. And this is what I see a lot happening in guys' porn use. They have this negative internal self-perception, and that leads them to living a life that they want to escape from, because they don't believe they're worth doing good things. They don't take care of themselves properly, all this kind of stuff. And what they need to do is reject all of that. They need to start caring for themselves. They need to replace these old thought processes. They need to realize that I'm worthy of living a life that I don't want to escape from. And the guys who do this, then they end up being, I think, further ahead than the guys who are just, feeling good about themselves from day one. So, not to paint a bleak picture here, this is something you can change, but it's something you have to be aware of.
I think I've fallen into the trap that many people have of looking at those guys you were talking about who try to appease feminist type characters, and we look at those people and we say, oh, they're just trying to get some. They're really bad at it, and
they are certainly trying to do that, but go on.
Well, some of them I'm sure are, but you talking about that made me you realize, a lot of them might not be. A lot of them might just be doing what they've been told is the best thing to do and believing, the right things to believe.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that there's definitely like an innocence to a lot of the dysfunction and masculinity that you see. But you think about it, it's like, how do you get women, in the right way? It's by living as the best man that you can, if we're going to just boil it all down to the very core of it. And so like, even if that's what they believe naturally, like authentically, truthfully is the very best thing to do.
Yeah.
On some level, the sexual equation is a part of it, because that's, unless you're willing to step into the weird world of, sexual market manipulation, where you're just trying to, press buttons and change variables and become a pickup artist to get laid.
Right.
Your path to sexual success is by climbing the status hierarchy in the way in which you see is best. So you can't fully, I think, separate them, which I think in part is why it does look so pitiful to be a simpering, effeminate man.
Yeah. Man, oh man. Well, guys, next up, this is an interesting story. So Senator Mike Lee recently proposed several bills that would limit minors' access to pornography. And so this clip is Matt Walsh with some details.
Okay. Limiting pornography. Let's see.
It may surprise you to learn this, but there are at least a few people in Congress who are interested in doing their jobs. Emphasis on a few, a very few indeed. One of the few, however, is Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who just in the last couple of days has introduced 2 bills with the aim of combating the proliferation of online pornography, especially as it affects kids. The Daily Wire reports on a great bill whose only flaw is that it really reaches for the acronym in its title. So, it says, quote, the Shielding Children's Retinas from Egregious Exposure on the Net Act, or SCREEN Act, would direct the FCC to mandate that all pornographic websites adopt age verification technology to keep children from accessing porn online. Lee previously proposed a bill in September to prevent sexual exploitation on porn sites. The Preventing Rampant Online Technological Exploitation and Criminal Trafficking, PROTECT Act, that one's not so bad. That actually wasn't a reach at all. That was well done. Would require age and consent verification of those depicted in sexually explicit or intimate materials online. Of course, the usual suspects are panicking over these proposed measures. Articles at outlets like Vice and Gizmodo worry that it could spell doom for the porn industry as a whole. It could take down the porn industry, which is music to my ears personally. I mean, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you know that I'm in favor of banning porn outright. I would like to ban all of it. Because pornography is not speech. Porn is prostitution, okay? Very clearly, it is monetized sex. It is transactional sex. It is sex as a product to be consumed. If old-fashioned prostitutes cannot claim First Amendment protections, then neither should the prostitutes who happen to use the internet to whore themselves out.
Interesting. Well, I'm all on board with that bill. I think, absolutely we should have age verification for pornography. That'd be great. I think that'd be wonderful. I think, the amount and the rate at which young men and women, really boys and girls are being exposed to pornography is startling and disgusting. And I think it's going to be so bad. Kids are growing up with more unrestricted technology access than ever before. And I know that this is going to become a disgusting, huge issue. And it already is. Like now, it's going to get so much worse. It's going to be so messed up as time progresses. And so I am all on board with that. Now, as for Matt Walsh's idea of banning pornography outright, I strongly disagree with that. I am much more of a libertarian when it comes to social activities. Like I believe all drugs should be legal, but I believe that they should be, controlled in a sense, right? Like in the same way that pornography can be controlled by having like a strict age verification. I think you should only be able to buy your cocaine or your heroin from a trusted source, something that has, government processes in place to make sure it's all good and safe. And then we could stop fighting, trying to stop it and stop spending so much money trying to keep people from getting after it, and instead spend more money on awareness, rehabilitation, and protection. All the money that's spent on, chasing it down and, fighting the war on drugs, it could just, I think you let people, like, I'm of the belief that you can't protect people from themselves. Fundamentally, you can't protect people from themselves because they will find a way to hurt themselves if they want to. And so your job as the government is to figure out how we can make it so that if someone does hurt themselves, they can unhurt themselves or they can avoid inadvertent harm. Okay. So, it's like you get rid of this kind of stuff. It's just going to make a black market for it. And then once there's a black market for it, it's going to get worse, not better. Okay. Because guaranteed you ban it all, there will be a black market up ASAP. There already is, the dark web already exists. And if people start going there for their pornography, well, guess what's going to happen? Now they're in completely unreachable, modifiable access points where, the proliferation of, child abusive sort of material is probably going to skyrocket along with other kinds of illegal activity. And so my whole thought is keep it in the light and just make it as clean as you can. Now, obviously, I'm super against pornography. A huge part of my professional life is about combating it. But I'm not interested in trying to remove people's access to it, because there will always be opportunities for people to behave in shitty ways. I think the battle needs to be fought on the moral level, on the level of the will, of the spirit. And to legislate like this, I think it's just signing up for more problems, because then it becomes this really slippery slope of like, what can people do among themselves, their own consenting selves, their own, even in just by themselves. Okay. So yeah, I like some of this. I don't like some of it, but I'm happy to hear you guys' thoughts on this. What do you think? Do you agree with me or not?
Yeah. Do you think the bill will pass through?
Probably not. I can't. I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I can't see it either.
I just think the porn lobby probably just has too much money. And honestly, I would love to see them all take a huge financial hit. That'd be wonderful. But yeah, I'll hold a slim bit of hope, but my faith in the Republicans in power is very minuscule. So we'll have to see what happens. What do you think? You think it'll go through?
No, I don't. I wish I was hopeful for it. I can't see it happening, but I hope they surprise me. And I'm glad that he's fighting for this, because it seems like Mike Lee's been pushing this stuff for a while. So maybe if he keeps trying, there's been some surprises with certain laws being torn down and such in recent times that I didn't see coming either. So.
The abortion thing went back to the States. I didn't see that happening. So, there's a possibility. I mean, this one seems like a no-brainer. I mean, it's already the law.
It really does.
So it's just enforcing it more. And I definitely think that's a legit law. I don't think, porn and drugs and, all the stuff I'm talking about should be available to minors. This is something that, if you're at the point where the country can ask you to go fight in a foreign war, then you should be able to make a decision about what you want to do with it.
Yeah, it's bizarre to me that these outlets like Vice, I mean, as Elliot Holst pointed out, their name literally is Vice, so maybe I shouldn't be surprised.
Right.
But who could say that this is a bad thing? Oh, well, MindGeeks will go out of business. Okay, great.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. That'd be wonderful. I would love it if MindGeek goes out of business. They don't need oh God, do something that has value to the world. My God.
Yeah, it's sad, but yeah, you know what? I'm gonna choose to believe that it will go through, and maybe not this one, but maybe
something's gonna have to happen
eventually.
Something's gonna have to happen at some point. So sooner the better.
Yeah. All right. Well, last but not least, a Self Mastery Club member had an interesting post in the relationships group, and so I wanted to check that out together and kind of, go through his case here, because it really roped me in. It seems like it would be not that big a deal, but I can see how a small disagreement like this can actually kind of grow over time. So,
all right,
let's go ahead and check that out.
All right, I'm just gonna read it here. So they say, I am wondering if anyone would have any advice for me when it comes to my relationship with my wife. I have several pain points with her, and I will try to articulate them all here at some point. I feel like it will be good to try and address these things for a more successful reboot. I feel like I am always doing the chores. I do the dishes daily. I vacuum. I take out the trash. I feed our dog, and I give him his pills on time. I meal prep, grocery shop, etc. I am always putting things away to keep the house neat and tidy as I can. My wife doesn't do any of this stuff. She has little to no discipline or good habits built up around it. If I ask her if she can help out and do the dishes, she will tell me things like it's going to take her 2 days to get to it. If it was up to her, she would let things pile up and turn the place into a total mess. This happened when I was gone for a few months. The place turned into a total disaster. Before we got married, I would visit her apartment, and sometimes it would just be so messy with piles of clothes and items everywhere. I got really upset with her and told her that I couldn't marry someone who kept such a messy house. She got really upset, and it was this big fight. Needless to say, she cleaned her apartment after that, but it never became a habit. I see this with her parents also. Her childhood home always has piles of things all over the countertops, dog hair everywhere, dirt on the walls, etc. No one in the family thinks anything of it. When we first got married, I freaked out about this, and it's been a point of contention in our marriage ever since. She got upset when I told her that I wasn't going to do her laundry. Then I bought a hamper just for her and put piled up clothes in it. Now she uses the hamper and takes months to do loads of her own laundry. Sometimes she will wear shirts that smell. I really don't know how to get through to her. We had a plan where we would each do the dishes every other day, but that didn't last. I can't stand living in a messy home, and it gives me anxiety and stresses me out, especially considering that we live in a small space, about 800 square feet. I can't count on her to have any autonomy with this, so I just take care of the chores. But then the resentment builds. Most days I am fine, but sometimes I get so upset and angry about it. I have no idea how to get through to her with this. I've used I statements like, I feel like I am always doing the dishes. It doesn't matter. I've tried to talk to her about it so many times in different ways. I've written out a list of chores. I've tried to have family meetings with her and just came to the conclusion that she lives a messier life than me, and that's always going to be the way it is. In one way, I think that by having such good habits around chores that I am enabling her to be this way. On the other hand, if I just do nothing, then this place will turn into hell in a handbasket. I know I can't change her, but I'm also at my wit's end. All right. So a lot of interesting stuff here. I would say there's a couple things to this. All right. You knew she was like this when you married her. Now, my question for you is, how much of a buy-in did you get from her that she was going to change this? It sounds like you confronted her about her apartment and she like tried to start cleaning her place and whatever. And so it's like, if it was clear that like you wouldn't marry her unless she changed this, then you've got something. If you didn't, then we're in a different place, because it's like you can't expect someone to change just because you marry them. All right. Unless they literally agreed to it, unless it was like, you know, you could make the reasonable case that it was part of the marital vow. And in that case, then, you know, I think you probably just need to push as hard as you possibly can if you want to see anything change. I don't think the right answer is for you to just keep sucking it up. And part of what this might entail is just making it into a shit show and just like continuing to push it until you see a permanent change. And this is a big thing. Okay. Like if she like this could seriously blow up into something. And the question is this, all right, do you want to navigate the shit show of taking this seriously and pushing for a change? Or do you want to navigate the shit show of being her maid for the rest of your life? It's pretty much what you're facing here. Either that or divorce, obviously. But my assumption is that you don't want to divorce this woman. So sometimes it's like the best thing that you can do is step into a fight. Because, you know, if you keep going like this, you keep being, you know, let yourself being stepped upon and building resentment and that sort of thing, then you're not going to find peace and satisfaction with it. And I know people who do this, and I don't think it's a good strategy. What you're probably going to run into, frankly, is her trauma, you know, her emotional baggage, because that's what it seems to be with people who are like very, very messy. It's because there's some kind of deeper emotional thing. And when the idea of cleaning comes up for them, a lot of shit comes up. It's not, they don't just see a pile of dishes. They see something else. There's some other kind of psychological monster looming in the wings that's preventing them from taking action on it. And, you know, if you want them to confront it, then the best thing that you can do is offer them ultimatums, really. It's like, you know, maybe this is something that she actually probably needs therapy around. You might need to have marriage counseling around it. And it's going to be up to her whether she wants to make it work or not, right? And so the question is, who's going to be more persistent, you or her baggage? Right? Because her baggage is going to put up a huge fight. It's going to be like, no, fuck this. I don't really care. Or worse, it'll pretend to care and then maybe change for a little bit and then slip and slide and fall off. And so it's like, are you going to be willing to keep entering back into a fight and into a conflict to ensure that this change takes root? And, you know, could this split up your marriage? Yeah. It could. There's a risk of that if you want to go this route. And is it possible that you could just learn how to be at peace with being her maid? Yeah, you could do that too. But you have to ask yourself, is that actually authentic to you? And if it is, go for it. You know, be her maid. There are people I know who do that. They do it for the sake of the marriage because they don't want to push and they're afraid of what would happen if they did. They can't handle the fights anymore, that sort of thing. Well, that's your baggage then at that point, because if you're unwilling to go that route. And I suppose you could take that even from you could take that route of just becoming the maid from a place of true self-sacrifice and love. But the way that you're writing this makes me think that that's not really the viable option. So I don't know, man. I think you're gonna have to think about this, and if you decide that you really want it changed or you need it changed in order to be authentic to yourself, then get ready for a knockdown, drag out war, and don't back down. Be as kind as you possibly can, but be prepared to be assertive and escalate things as needed. So it's harsh advice, but it's kind of what I got for you.
You know, when I was first reading this, my first thought was, man, if this was me, it would be excellent motivation to make a crap ton more money so I could hire somebody to just come in and clean our house for us.
Yeah, that's another option too. But, if that's not the place
if you do that,
right now,
though, it seems like by doing that, you're kind of robbing your wife of the opportunity to address those deeper issues that you're talking about. Because I think you're right, Mark. It's just kind of, no pun intended, but this smells like something is deeper going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but what do you think about that? Get somebody at $10 an hour to come in, clean everything.
You can for sure do that. I mean, like maybe your wife is like more like she'd be willing to sacrifice other things. Like if your money's limited, well, maybe she doesn't get this thing or the other, so that you guys can get a cleaner in or something like that. That could be a compromise. But the way I would broach this to her is like being honest with her about how much this sincerely bothers you and that you're at a breaking point with it. And then offer her it as like, hey, I think this is an opportunity. I think there's a way we can grow as a couple. I think, there's an opportunity here for you to grow and, step into the wonderful life of being a clean person. And, you try and keep it positive. You try to keep it optimistic. You try to keep it constructive. But realistically speaking, something like that, it's not going to work, and it's going to become a fight. And you got to be willing to fight in an articulate, centered, generous, loving manner. But ultimately, you're fighting for the benefit of your family, of your marriage, of yourself, and even, honestly, for her. So as long as you stay in that frame, who knows? I feel fairly confident saying that a part of her wants to be forced to change in this way because she can't actually like living like this. She just is afraid. She has massive resistance. She's got a massive emotional backlog, and she's going to have to work through it if you guys are going to find peace, I think. So, you can only control what you can control, but this is how I would go about controlling it.
There we have it, guys. Go ahead and check out the free training in the description. Mark, is there anything else we want to say to the viewers?
I think check out the training, check out the Self-Mastery Club. If you're not getting the daily emails, make sure you're getting them. You can either go to markquepit.com and sign up there, or you can just check out the training, and when you put your email in, that'll put you on the list. So that's what we have for you guys today. Ooh-yah. Good luck in 2023. Make sure you leave your New Year's resolutions in the comments below. All right. Peace.